exposed and a lot of your contemporaries have exposed is that ancient history isn't studied by architects. Do you know what I mean? And engineers, right?
Yeah.
Like, so they're applying these ideas and principles to the information that they have, but they don't know what the fucking Mohs scale is. So they're finding some tools and they're seeing some rocks and they're going, okay, this is how they probably chopped up the rock.
And in their mind, engineering is limitless. You can do whatever, whereas an engineer would be like, no, you can't.
Well, an engineer shows up and then it looks at the granite and goes, wait, they did what with the granite?
Yeah, it's the engineers that come along, and in a lot of cases, the whole, like, all of the problems that come up with that orthodox story when it comes to engineering topics, that's been raised by engineers. It's a strange thing to me. It's like you wouldn't ask an archaeologist to design the chair that he's sitting on, right?
Yeah.
But if it's an ancient chair, he's going to claim domain over it and dominion over it and say, I'm the expert, I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
So a lot of that happens. And that's not to say they haven't tried to make studies into it. And that's part of my work. I dive into these studies and kind of tear them apart because they're ultimately really silly. And when you go to Egypt, you take engineers, construction experts, architects, people look at it and they just see it immediately and go, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't the work of a primitive civilization or a Bronze Age civilization with simple tools. And then, you come back to the pyramid and when you start to realize, like, there's so much more involved in this. There's evidence of this, of the people that build it having cosmic knowledge, having knowledge of the planet, the dimensionality of the Earth to a crazy degree. Like, so if you take here's an easy statistic. If you take the height of the Great Pyramid, you multiply it by 43,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth. So
what does that mean, polar radius?
So from the center of the Earth to the North Pole, polar radius. If you take the perimeter length of the Great Pyramid, you measure around the perimeter of it, and you multiply that by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. So the length of the equator.
Is this
so it's
43,200.
So this gets into Randall Carlson territory. It's a 43272, 7. It all relates back to I guess the cosmic sort of cycles and all of these processional numerology. When you talk about precession of the equinoxes, are you familiar with this term? So it's the great year. Right now we're in the age of Pisces. It's that 26,000 year cycle that's defined by where the sun rises on the solstice, and it's like under what constellation does it rise. So right now we're in the age of Pisces. We're transitioning into. There's a whole song about this. You know what the next age is?
Aquarius.
The age of Aquarius, right? And in fact, there's references in the Bible about this. It literally, and think about, like, Jesus kind of represents the age of Pisces in a lot of ways.
Oh, look at they have the fish on the back
cars,
of the car?
Yeah, they have the Jesus fish on the car. It's always a giggle because it's like, okay, it's Jesus, but you're actually, it's an analogy for the age of Pisces that we live in. And, he was, he's part of his disciples were fishermen. He fed people with bread and fish. The age before Jesus, 2,000 years ago, was the age of Aries, the ram. So think about another biblical figure that existed
Isaac.
In the old time. Well, Moses as well, right?
Oh, right.
And he blew the ram's horn. And before that,
I wonder if that was him trying to talk, because he had a speech impediment. So I wonder if, like, they thought it was a ram's horn, but he was just like, hey.
Yeah, maybe. It just sounds like a ram's horn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, but regardless, okay, it makes sense.
Yeah, well, and it goes further too. It's like you go back further, and the age before that, another 2,000 years before that, was age of Taurus, the bull. So the sun's rising under the constellation of Taurus on that spring solstice. And the story about Moses, do you remember what happened when he came down from Mount Sinai with the commandments from God, when he was, what he found his followers doing?
Yeah, worshipping Baal.
Yeah, worshipping the golden calf. And he murdered all those motherfuckers for it, and they smashed the idol up. It's sort of representation of age of Taurus is ending. Now we're in the age of Aries. Now we're in the age of Pisces. And then there's a part in the Bible, I can't just going from memory, they're talking about Passover or the Last Supper, and one of Jesus' disciples asked him, what will we do without you, O Lord? Like, what happens when you're gone? He says, have no fear, go into town, find a man bearing a pitcher of water, follow him to his house, and there you will find sustenance. So, how is Aquarius described or shown? It's like a man bearing a pitcher of water, right? They're literally telling, so it's this cosmic knowledge that's encoded in these stories.
Okay.
And it's encoded in monuments like the pyramid. It's not, they even have knowledge of the pyramid. It encodes the specific shape of the Earth. By that, I mean the Earth being this oblate spheroid, right? We're a little bit fatter around the edge than we are around north-south, right? Because we spin.
Yeah.
So we're not a perfect sphere. that ratio, you'd call it the ratio of latitude to longitude. So if you take that grid of latitude and longitude, you spread it out on the planet, you go down to 1/4 of 1 degree, and you measure it, so it's a little bit further sort of east-west than it is north-south. That ratio of latitude to longitude is expressed in the pyramid. Because it sits on something, I talked about the foundation, it sits on the foundation called the socle. So it's like they call it, it's a cubit height. It's about this high, sticks out about this far. So it gives you 2 ways to measure the perimeter length, right? You can measure the base of the pyramid, or you can measure the base of the socle being slightly larger. And when you ratio or you compare those 2 numbers,
it's latitude
and longitude.
Wow.
And bear in mind that we couldn't figure out how to measure longitude accurately in our own civilization until the turn of the 19th century. I think that's when it was. James Cook's second voyage of discovery. We could not measure longitude to save ourselves until we developed chronometers and watches accurate enough to do so.
And you're saying, according to the traditional archaeologists, 4,500 years ago, and you believe probably much longer, they knew.
So if we're accepting
longitude and latitude,
they knew the shape of the Earth.
If we're accepting traditional archaeology, there's just all these crazy coincidences, and none of that. They had no idea that if you multiply, it's a longitude, and latitude.
At that time, they just were not aware. They were not privy to this information. There's no proof to show that they were.
They say it's a coincidence. All of these things, you keep coming up with them because there's other, there's some people make an argument that the speed of light is encoded in the damn thing. There's all these crazy golden ratios and metrics when you get into like the King's Chamber and the geometry of that. It relates back to the meter. There's so many interesting studies about it, but it's generally all described and hand-waved away as well. It's just coincidence, and it's like, so you can find this stuff and you analyze anything.
You're approaching this, and like a lot of people in your position are going, these are a lot of coincidences. And it might be easier to look at these people who built the pyramids as a different group of people than the dynastic Egyptians that lived, 4,500 years ago.
Exactly what I think. I think what we're looking at, and it goes so much further than the pyramids to me, we're looking at the remnants of a lost civilization, and that left stuff. They might have left cultural knowledge, they might have left architecture and objects that were inherited by essentially a Mesolithic people that developed into a Bronze Age culture that we call the dynastic Egyptians. I think we have a good understanding of the dynastic Egyptian civilization. The tools that we found, the way they lived their life, that's the job of the Egyptologist. And I think we're right about those guys. I just don't think you can say they made everything. And in fact, they themselves don't say that. Like, their own history goes back 40-something thousand years. Like
so when do you think they're made?
Oh, so it's a lot of, I think, pre-cataclysm, a lot of this stuff, and I'm not saying the pyramids as they are, you do have to kind of look through all this stuff with the lens of, I need to preface this, because it's like, there were thousands and thousands of years of renovation, reuse, rebuilding, adaptation, and then thousands of years of deconstruction, quarrying. Like, they've literally been ripping stone off these pyramids for the last couple thousand years and selling it. Up until about 50, 60 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's just that, you have to look at it through that lens, and the Egyptians spent many thousands of years working on this stuff and renovating it, using it for their own purposes. But I think a lot of this stuff goes back to before the cataclysm, like the Younger Dryas period, which we can talk more about. But potentially goes back way further than that. If I'm going to speculate, I mean, hundreds of thousands of years, potentially 50, because... And this is where it gets interesting, because there's so many other vectors from modern science right now that it should be affecting that story of history, right? The last 20 years, we've seen incredible advances in our knowledge base. Not just the cataclysm stuff. To me, that's the key that kind of unlocks the whole picture, but even the history of the human race itself. Right? We thought for the longest time, if you're creationist, 6,000 years, okay? But for the longest time, Victorian era, like, well, maybe it's 50,000 years as a species. Then once we start dating human remains, we get to like 190,000 years old, like we found some stuff in Ethiopia. And then recently, in the last couple of decades...
300, right?
Morocco. They found a modern, anatomically correct... Yep, Morocco. You nailed it. And that takes us to about 300,000 years old. That's still the oldest actual thing in the fossil record, but now we've got DNA studies. There's a study that's done recently that shows, like, we diverged... Us and Neanderthals, like, diverged from a common ancestor somewhere in the 800,000-year-old range is what they're guessing. And then the latest thing in the last couple of years, studies into teeth morphology, like the really nerdy studies into how teeth evolve and grow over time, and they're putting it back at 900 to 1 million years old.
Okay,
as a species.
So there is a chance that human beings have been here for 1 million years in our current form. Yeah,
and
we
modern,
see
anatomically correct, humans. You could shave one down and put him out in the street. It's like
And it looks like a
Brendan
dude.
Fraser and, Encino Man.
Yeah. Now, yeah, that's crazy. Now, we see how much changes within 1,000 years. We see how much changes within 200 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like from the 1800s to now, a lot fucking changes. So it is very possible there could be a civilization that pops up, achieves immense success, gets wiped out, happens again, like almost on some Matrix shit.
Yeah, it's a cycle. I actually do think it's a long, convoluted thing to get to about why this stuff's important. Is I do think there's a cycle almost of civilization and catastrophe or cataclysm, and we've been through it.
All right, guys, let's take a break for a second, man. This beautiful thing that I got right here. Hold up. Wait a minute. Fume has no tobacco in it. Think about that. Think about that. Absolutely no tobacco. Nothing harmful. No potentially harmful chemicals. Nothing. Fume using cores infused with plants like peppermint, cinnamon for delicious natural flavors. You take a pull, that crisp mint is just delicious. It's awesome. This is Fume. You should try it out, and I think that you'll like it 100%. So the easiest way to stop a bad habit is to switch to a positive one, and Fume is designed perfectly to do just that. It's Fume's goal to make switching easy and even enjoyable. They have thousands of five-star reviews from people just like you who've successfully switched when the other solutions just didn't work. So head to tryfume.com and use the code FLAGRANT to save 10% off when you join the Journey Pack today. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors, a new version 2 Fume to help kickstart your positive habits. That's tryfum.com. Use the code FLAGRANT to save an additional 10% on your order today. Now let's get back to the show. All right, guys, we're gonna take a break for a second because it's March motherfucking Madness, and Flagrant is getting down with this bracket syndrome, and we're doing it with Run Your Pool. Okay, you go to play.runyourpool.com/flagrant right now. You join the brackets. We got free money if you win. Look at that. Run Your Pool is giving up $1,500, okay? Divide by the top 5 winners. It's free for you to sign up. You just go sign up right now. You can win $1,500. We're in it. Akash in it, Mark in it, Alex in it, Miles in it, Dove in it, I'm in it, Jamil's in it. It's going down, okay? Play.runyourpool.com/flagrant right now. You could win that free money. And to make it even more sweet, the winner, we gonna double up that fucking money.
Oh, shit.
We gonna double up that fucking money. Whoever wins the bracket, we're doubling up out of our part, okay? That's you. You go to play.runyourpool.com/flagrant. Sign up right now. Let's get into this March Madness action, okay? It's another pool. It costs you absolutely nothing, and you can win real bread. Now, if you're trying to gamble, okay? If you're trying to put some real money down, if you're trying to get after it when it comes to March Madness, because I understand there's a lot of action going down here. It's very exciting.
Always big betting.
Big bets. But it's very hard not to be emotional. You see your alma mater playing, you want to put some money down on it, but if you can be a rational bettor, or just say fucking throw caution to the wind.
That's what I think. I think the beauty of March Madness is you don't even really have to know basketball.
Yeah, you just...
College basketball, there's so many upsets. Just throw just put a few bucks down, throw it out, see what
Ask your girl who's going to win.
Ask
just
your
say the
girl.
name of the universities and be like, yo, who got this?
Which sounds right.
That's it. Go with it.
And you know what's good about betonline.ag?
What's that?
You get free money when you sign up.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Look at that.
They match your initial deposit up to $1,000 by 50%.
That's right.
So if you put in $1,000, you get 500 free bucks. Why not run that on some March Magic?
Go get some money, boys. So you just explain, I think it was Robert Schoch had the theory about the Sphinx with water erosion.
That's right.
And I think that kind of begins this conversation about Younger Dryas, right? Isn't that like...
it begins, it ties it back to an era that happens to coincide with the Younger Dryas, and also for that matter Atlantis and Solon's and Plato's story of the destruction of Atlantis.
All of a sudden the dates start lining up.
They really do. It's amazing.
So break this down. What is his theory? And
the great, we shouldn't forget the rest in peace John Anthony West.
Oh yeah.
So he and Robert Schoch, he's the guy who invited Robert Schoch, and John Anthony West looked at it at the Sphinx. So the Sphinx, it sits down at the end of there's a causeway connected to the middle pyramid complex. It's in this big enclosure. The Sphinx is not like a built thing, like they carved down into the ground and then they shaped it out of bedrock. It was originally what you would call a yardang. Yeah, it's a crazy name, but it's like this limestone outcropping that sticks up out of the ground. That was essentially its head. So they carved this big pit and they shaped this thing out of out of limestone, out of bedrock. So there's been a study done. So Robert Schoch, who's a geologist, I think the professor of geology at the Boston University, if I'm not wrong, went and looked at the erosion that is present on the enclosure walls. Now, the Sphinx itself has been repaired and worked on for, like, the Old Kingdom. There's records of... There's another thing. There's actually records of the Old Kingdom people fixing it when they supposedly built it, which is like, how does that make sense? The Romans did it, the New Kingdom guys did it, you know, our modern guys have done it, the British were working on it. So the Sphinx itself's hard to get those indicators, but the walls of the enclosure are untouched. So he went in and studied it, and he's looking at these vertical fissures and going, that's rainfall erosion. But it takes a tremendous amount of rain to create these vertical fissures in the limestone. And remember, we're talking about the Sahara Desert. It doesn't rain a whole lot. I've seen it happen, but you're talking about like a lot of heavy rain, thousands of years of it. Now, studies of the climate and the history of the region, we know that takes us back to
these types of fissures if you go to look at any of like the canyons in the United States of America, and I'm sure there's other places, but you see these cracks in the stone, and that's exactly how it was described to me. It was like, this is water erosion, sometimes heavy rain, or sometimes there'll be like water actually coming through the canyons, but these are these vertical cracks that exist in it.
Fissures.
Vertical fissures. And so it was really cool when it was pointed out on the Sphinx, and I'm like, well, where the fuck would the water come from that would create these? Because it's intense amount of water that has to create.
It's rain, usually super heavy rain. It's a different, if that was like filled up with water, you'd get a different type of erosion. That's a whole other thing. There does seem to be some evidence for that in some other areas, which is like, holy crap, because the evidence for mega floods in Egypt is there as well. But this specifically is like rainfall erosion, so that's where he dates it back to, you know, 10,000 to 12,000 sort of years ago, right in that period. Now, when he presented this, and if you, by the way, if you take that, an image of those fissures and that limestone wall, and you present it to pretty much any geologist without the context of the Sphinx, this is the Sphinx enclosure, they're going to take its rainfall erosion. Like even the arguments to this day, because they don't want to admit it, they're really weak source arguments against Schoch's theory. But when he went and presented it, he kind of got laughed. He thought he was doing something that's going to really advance our knowledge base, but he kind of got laughed out of the room by the Old Boys Network. In fact, it was Mark Lehner who's like, like, show me the potsherds. What is this date of like 10,000 BC? Now, the funny thing about that is then along comes Göbekli Tepe, because that's a site in Turkey, ancient site, discovered mid-90s by the German Archaeological Institute, and Klaus Schmidt. You should like try not to say Klaus Schwab.
Don't say that.
Wrong Klaus. Although sadly Klaus Schmidt has passed away too. But that site's been carbon dated, and they know it was deliberately buried. It's bang on in that time period. It's not very far away. They built giant stone megaliths and pillars and stuff that, 10, 20 tons. There was a culture doing that at that time. It's like,
the time is 9,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, no, 9,000 BC.
9,000 BC, so that is 11,000 years ago. Yeah.
Around that. And there's not only but now it's Karahan Tepe and all these tepes. There might be dozens of sites now. They're even bigger than Göbekli.
So you know that there is an ancient civilization creating some cool megalithic shit around 11,000 years ago. Yeah. And then it just so happens, if you look at Egypt around 11,000 years ago, it was kind of wet.
Right, in that period, yes, there was rainfall erosion. But look, I also know that it wasn't just that period. And I know like Schoch has had to be pretty, political and cautious in his estimates. Yeah. But I do know that he also does push it back for, like, when pressed, I mean, he can go back for like 50, 60, 75,000 years old. Because, there's other correlations with the Sphinx, the age of Leo.
Okay, explain that one. So this is what I think is quite interesting. So let's just say we're operating in that like 9, 10, 11,000 year range. Yeah. The Sphinx, as we see it now, is this like lion that has a human's head. Yes. Right? But the head is too small for the body.
That's crazy.
And if you were a brilliant, what do they call it? A stonemason?
Stone carver.
Stone carver. You're not going to make a mistake like that. If you're the same people that build the pyramids to exact proportions, you're not going to have this tiny little head and be like, oopsie, I guess we didn't figure that one out. Yeah. So what a common theme is that they came across the Sphinx and it had a lion's head. Mm-hmm. And then which pharaoh chopped it up and made the human one?
Yeah, we don't know. Well, it's attributed to Khafra, the owner of the Middle Pyramid, the son of Khufu, the big pyramid, 4th dynasty. That's generally what they say. You're absolutely right about the head. When you go there and look at it, the head's too small. Yeah. And the Egyptians, and they look, they were master craftsmen, and they built they made a lot of statues, did a lot of work. Absolute masters of proportion. I don't think they would have got that wrong either. Yeah. And there's an interesting thing about that too. It's like this story about the erosion, because it goes back to the fissures on the wall in the enclosure. They say, oh, that's wind and sand erosion. This is what they say, and you're like, okay. Well, you give that thing 50 years, you know what happens, right? It fills up to its neck in sand, or its chest in sand. So how long?
Yeah, when we discovered the Sphinx, I don't know how long ago.
Oh, I mean, Napoleon ran across. I mean, we knew it was there. We've known about it for a long time.
But when
it was
discovered,
forever.
it was buried up to the head.
There's
So
tons
they
of
didn't even know
pictures.
it had the body.
Yeah, it's like this head sticking out of the ground.
All the pyramids too. Like they've had to excavate to get to the bottom of these pyramids.
Oh, yeah,
right?
to get to the actual bottom layers. Yeah.
So I thought. So you're basically saying it was protected by sand.
Well,
it can't be eroded.
So that's the thing. How long does it take for this to be exposed, for it to be to get this wind and sand erosion on it?
Yeah.
And then you know what you don't see on the head? Wind and sand erosion. You don't see these vertical fissures. But that's the part of the Sphinx that's sticking up above the sand that would be hit by wind and sand all the time. So what is this telling you? Is like, okay, so is this head just? It's the same type of limestone. I mean, it varies in layers, but it's like this is way fresher. The head's way fresher than the rest.
So let's assume they did carve a head out of the lion's head, right? A human head out of a lion's head.
Yeah.
And let's assume the Sphinx, like the pyramids, had some sort of astronomical connection.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
It does. What does it line up with now?
Well, now I don't know. So it faces the sunrise, right? So it's. Well, I guess it's Pisces. It's where generally the way these goes in terms of the astronomical age or pointers. It's like the spring solstice, or it's it's one of those dates where it's
basically my question is, what was it 10,000 years ago?
Age of Leo the Lion.
So you have.
So it literally lines up as a marker.
It lines up 10,000 years ago with, we're talking about the age, like the sun rises in, now it's
Pisces.
Pisces, it's going to be Aquarius. And the constellation that was fucking rising on was Leo. It's got the body of the Leo. It's got this tiny little shrunken head, right? Which could have been carved out of a lion's head. There's a lot of things that are making sense for this time.
Question about the head. Is the...
So, are there chisel marks on it?
Are the chisel marks as precise on the Sphinx's head as they are in the rest of the pyramids? Because if they're imprecise, that would speak to the ancient Egyptians
civilized or less
not
advanced
having
civilization,
technology.
I don't think there's any of what I would call the advanced tool marks on the head of the Sphinx. No.
What about the
it's
unadvanced
limestone?
ones?
Yeah, are they like kind of jagged?
Yeah,
not
it's similar. It's very similar to a lot of the work and the quarrying that you see. Because it's so big and it's relatively rough. It's huge, right? But it's also limestone, which is much easier to carve than granite.
Yeah.
But there's not. I mean, when you get into tool marks, maybe we can talk about that in a bit. It's like these tubular drills and the actual saw cuts, the circular saw cuts.
Man, I haven't laughed that hard in a long time.
Diorite,
crap.
the really hard stones. You don't see it as often in limestone. That was much easier to work. I do think it was very, very likely the dynastic Egyptians who recovered the Sphinx. I 100%.
And dynastic Egyptians, for everybody listening, that's 4,500 years.
From the start, up until about 30 BC. So their civilization spanned a good 3,000 years thereabouts, like from 2500, 3,000, 2500 to 30 BC with Cleopatra.
Yeah.
With the snake.
Game over.
Yeah,
okay. Okay, so now that takes us to the Younger Dryas.
Right.
So what the fuck is happening? Well, first, can you explain to people why an ice age isn't like the movie? I think the common perception for humans is when it's an ice age, everything in the world is completely frozen over. Nothing can live except a little squirrel with acorns.
It's called the Ice Age.
It makes sense.
We're in the fucking ice age. We're still in it. We're in an interglacial period in an ice age right now.
So if there's glaciers...
It's 53 degrees in New York while we're filming.
Yeah.
Ice age is
actually
fire.
Nice. Ice ages are great. Well, it's not snowball Earth. Like, it's not this planet snowball idea. Millions and millions of years ago, there may have been periods like that. But no, Ice Age and the glacial maximum refers to like when we had the Laurentide, the Cordilleran, and the European glaciers, these 2 miles of ice that were sitting up on top of the northern hemisphere of the planet. It was generally colder, but there were plenty of temperate zones and even tropical zones along the
essentially, it's
equator.
a percentage of glacial ice
Yeah.
that qualifies a time period to be an ice age.
They generally go on like the extent of the glaciers. And so we can see from glacial till and the moraines and all of these geological features about how far the glaciers extended. We would have been buried under a couple miles of ice right here, back in that period. But it's also the sea levels were 400 feet lower because all that water's up on the land now, and all that melts, sea levels rise, all that stuff. And so that abruptly ended. And so we've known, it's kind of interesting, it's all work that's happened in the last couple decades, really, that has really advanced our understanding of what occurred at the end of that last glacial maximum. Because it was violent. Like, that's the thing. It turns out it was tremendously violent. Like,
again, so we understand this. The Younger Dryas is the Ice Age, or is the violent time?
The Younger Dryas is essentially the boundary between what we would call the Pleistocene, which was the glacial, like the end of the, like we would generally call it the Ice Age, but that's the glacial maximum, and the Holocene, which is the era we're in now. This nice warm weather that's been pretty stable for, 10,000 years or so. Like, that's where we live. It's the reason.
So this is the
It's the
transition.
reason why we've got a civilization.
Gotcha.
The Younger Dryas is the transition point between that, and it gets crazy wacky in terms of. So we're kind of.
Something happened 12,000 years ago.
Yeah, 12,800 years ago. It's a period between 12,800 years ago and 11,600 years ago. And if you go back, it's this tumultuous time. So we kind of have learnt this from ice core data. So we go and drill down in Antarctica and Greenland, and we drill down because right down into the ice, and you extract these big tubes of ice, because every year, the snowfall gets laid down on there and it's compacted, and you can do analysis on it and look at things like oxygen isotopes and determine temperature and accumulation of snow and all these different things about the past.
So a similar thing almost like with trees and rings.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're doing that with ice.
With ice, and you can go back hundreds of thousands of years.
I needed to
So
be
what
low
we've learned
idea.
is that something happened. Like, we're coming out of this more or less warm, gentle, we're warming up from this, glacial maximum, but then all of a sudden it just goes boom down to these severe cold for 800 years, and then it's boom, jacked back up again by another event, and then it's this gentle warming thing that gets us up to more or less the temperature we have now. But there's this really violent period in between called the Younger Dryas. You go back further, there's ups and downs as well, but the other thing that correlates to the Younger Dryas is this extinction event.
Oh,
We've
let's
known
go.
about that forever, right? We've dug up mammoth bones and saber-toothed tigers and American lions and short-faced bears, like all these giant animals. It's not the dinosaurs, but they were here.
Animals that exist now.
Animals, well, no, it's no animals that were here, but only some 12 to 13,000 years ago. So it's the megafauna extinction. Think about the mammoths. Like, some people get
megafauna for the people.
Well, megafauna is like any mammal or large animal with a body weight, I think, over 40 kilograms, so
woolly
80
mammoth.
pounds. Yeah, woolly mammoths. We are megafauna. Yeah.
Oh, us too.
Me in particular.
100 pounds, 40
Oh,
kilograms.
wow, wow.
I'm definitely megafauna. So 80 pounds-ish, something, 90 pounds, something like that. So, and the crazy thing is, as many species of megafauna that there are alive today, that's basically how many went extinct in a very short period of time. Also in that Younger Dryas period, like 11,600 to 12,800.
So Younger Dryas is not the event, it's the time period during after the event before things start to normalize.
Yeah, so it's this period of time where it's this tumultuous time. We've got these crazy swings in temperatures. We've got these massive sea level, like these meltwater pulses where the sea level rises tremendously, very violently, and we've got an extinction event now. All tied into this one period from ice core samples, and now, since 2007, there's more than 160 papers that have also shown there was a cosmic impact at that time. So digging in that layer, so in that same layer in the dirt, you dig down in the strata layers, you can date all that stuff, where those megafauna bones are, a lot of the extinction bones at that same layer, that's where we find what you call impact proxy, so shock synthesized nanodiamonds.
What does that mean?
So it's basically the impact, and it's the byproducts of extreme heat and pressure, and like soot layers and carbon and like all of these different indicators of basically cosmic impacts, like these gigantic explosions.
So this is what the Carolina Bays thing is.
Well, the Carolina Bays may or may not. It seems like it ties into this event, but no.
Let's not go there then.
Yeah, it's like a fallout. It's almost like splash damage. It's Carolina Bays is
Yeah.
just a byproduct almost of a big cosmic impact. This is like the same. This is like just unimaginably violent events. These cosmic, either it's airbursts or it's huge impacts of stuff that's like a mile, 2 mile wide, coming in at 40,000 kilometers a second kind of thing, and just pounding into the Earth, and then it creates these tellers, these microscopic telltale signatures like magnetic carbon spherules, shock synthesized nanodiamonds. There's a whole list of them. There's all these a lot of these scientific papers that have now figured that out.
Evidence of impact.
They call it impact proxies, yeah. So
Gotcha.
it's the thing we don't quite have are craters. Now that's stuff that Randall is working on, but you've got to also imagine some of these impacts,
Wait, where do they
they
even
might not have all
shoot
been
it?
impacts, they might have been airbursts. There was a good.
What is an airburst? Sorry.
So it's where it blows up before it hits the ground.
It's kind
so
of what we see now with like, what is it, shooting stars and stuff like that?
Yeah, there was a big one in Tunguska in Siberia.
Yeah, that's the Russian one. Yeah,
the Russian one. And
but isn't that impact though? That's
it was an
real impact.
airburst. It was an airburst.
But I thought
it
that
flattened a giant area. It was only a tiny little rock compared to what we would.
So it flattened an area despite it being an airburst?
Oh yeah, think of like a big bomb going off. It's just a shockwave comes down and just goes.
Oh, maybe we can
Massive
even get a
problems.
picture up of that to show it because it
Tunguska?
still hasn't
Yeah.
even recovered.